I stood in the driveway, the engine of my car humming faintly as if reluctant to silence the tension building inside me. The documents in my hand felt heavier than they should have, like a burden I wasn't ready to carry but knew I had to. As I stepped out, the cool night air hit my face. I remember thinking how ironic it was, the calmness outside, so far removed from the storm I was about to walk into. The front door creaked open as I pushed it, and that's when I heard it. The faint murmur of voices, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. My footsteps echoed across the polished marble floor as I made my way toward the living room, every step a reminder of what I was about to face. Then I saw them, Lila and Chris. She was perched on the couch, wine glass in hand, her laughter louder than it needed to be. Chris leaned in close, his hand brushing hers in a way that wasn't casual. They froze the moment they saw me. Lila's glass paused midair, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came out. Chris shifted uncomfortably, his face betraying a mix of guilt and defiance. I didn't need words from them. The silence said enough. I placed the stack of papers on the table between us. "I think you've been expecting this," I said, my voice steady but cold. Lila's eyes darted to the documents, then back to me, confusion flickering across her face. "What is this?" she asked, her tone tinged with an uncertainty she couldn't mask. "Your exit plan," I replied, locking eyes with her. "You wanted my wealth? You plotted to take it all and run off with him?" I pointed at Chris, who was now fumbling for something to say. "Well, guess what? I'm not the fool you think I am." I could see her mind racing, searching for an explanation, an excuse, anything to defuse the situation. "Nathan, this isn't what it looks like," she finally stammered, her voice trembling just enough to betray her fear. "Save it," I cut her off, stepping closer. "I've been watching you for months. Did you think I wouldn't notice the withdrawals? The late-night phone calls? Or how Chris conveniently started showing up everywhere we went?" Chris stood up abruptly, trying to play the hero in this pathetic story. "Look, Nathan," he began, his voice cracking slightly, "it's not what you think." I laughed, short, sharp, bitter. "What I think? You're standing in my house, drinking my wine, with my wife. What exactly do you think I'm thinking, Chris?" They had no answers, just silence, thick and heavy. I pointed at the papers again. "These are the deeds to every property you thought you were entitled to, but they're not in my name anymore. I transferred everything to my parents. You wanted my wealth? You get nothing." Lila's face turned pale as realization dawned. "You can't do this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Oh, I already did," I replied. "And trust me, this is just the beginning." Before we continue, we noticed that over 80% of our viewers haven't subscribed to the channel. If you're enjoying the story and want to support us, please hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss future uploads. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. As I said those words, the weight of the moment hit me, not because I regretted anything, but because of how far I had come to stand here and deliver those words with such conviction. It wasn't always like this. There was a time I would have given everything for Lila. I almost did. I sat in my car later that night, replaying everything that led to this confrontation. I remember the first time I met her. It was at a small cafe downtown, one of those places with mismatched furniture and a pianist tucked away in the corner. Lila walked in wearing a green dress that seemed to light up the whole room. She wasn't just beautiful. She had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world. That's what pulled me in. The way she smiled, the way she listened. Back then, I didn't have much. I had just started my real estate business, working 14-hour days to make ends meet. She told me she admired my ambition, that she believed in me even when I doubted myself. "You're going to do great things, Nathan," she'd say, her voice filled with certainty. I didn't just fall for her. I fell for the idea that she was my partner, my anchor in the chaos of building a life from nothing. For years, that's how it felt. We were a team. I'd work late into the night, and she'd bring me coffee, sit beside me, and tell me about her day. On weekends, we'd drive out to look at properties together. She had an eye for design, a knack for making spaces feel warm and inviting. I trusted her judgment as much as I trusted her love. But looking back, the cracks started to show long before I was willing to see them. It started small, things you wouldn't think twice about. Lila began talking more about the lifestyle we could have. She'd show me photos of extravagant vacations, luxury cars, homes and gated communities. At first, I thought it was harmless. She was dreaming big, just like me. But the dreams started turning into demands. Nathan, why are we still driving this old car? Nathan, we should get a bigger house. It'll look better for your business. The first time I felt the sting of her disappointment was the day I bought her a bracelet for our anniversary. It wasn't the most expensive one, but it was beautiful. I thought she'd love it. Instead, she smiled that tight, polite smile that barely touched her eyes. "It's nice," she said, and that was it. I brushed it off, told myself I was overthinking. She loved me, and that was all that mattered. But then came the late nights, hers, not mine. The unexplained shopping trips, the phone calls she'd step out of the room to take. I convinced myself it was nothing, that she deserved her space after all the sacrifices she'd made for me. But deep down, something didn't sit right. Then Chris entered the picture. He was an old friend from college. At least, that's how she introduced him. "Chris is just helping me with some design ideas for the new house," she'd say, waving off my concerns. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But every time I saw them together, there was something off. The way he looked at her, the way she laughed at his jokes. It wasn't the kind of laughter she shared with me anymore. I started noticing how often his name came up in conversations, how she'd defend him whenever I questioned their closeness. "You're being paranoid, Nathan," she'd say, rolling her eyes. And I believed her, because I didn't want to see the truth. I didn't want to admit that the woman I had built my life around was slipping away from me. The final straw came 6 months ago. I found a receipt for an expensive hotel in her purse, a hotel I had never taken her to. My hands shook as I held it, the reality staring back at me in black and white. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. Instead, she turned it around on me. "Maybe if you paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have to go elsewhere," she said, her voice cold, devoid of the warmth I once knew. That's when I realized I was nothing more than a stepping stone to her. She didn't love me. She loved what I could give her. The cars, the trips, the house. All of it was just a means to an end. And Chris? He was just the next step in her plan. I spent the next few months preparing, quietly, methodically. I moved all my assets into my parents' names, locked down my finances, and hired a private investigator to gather evidence. I told no one what I was doing, not even my closest friends. If Lila wanted to play this game, I was going to make sure I won. Sitting in the car that night, staring at the mansion I had worked so hard to build, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, betrayal, but also clarity. For the first time in years, I saw things for what they really were. And I knew exactly what I had to do. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, the weight of my plan heavy on my shoulders. This wasn't going to be easy, but I had no choice. Lila had made her intentions clear, and if I let her, she would strip away everything I had worked for. Not just the material things, but my dignity, my trust, and the life I'd built from scratch. No, I couldn't let that happen. Step one was patience. I couldn't confront her yet, not without ensuring every piece of the puzzle was in place. So, I played along. I pretended everything was normal. Every morning, I kissed her cheek before heading to work, even as I fought the bile rising in my throat. Every evening, I sat across from her at dinner, forcing myself to smile while she talked about her day. She thought she had me fooled, and I let her believe it. Meanwhile, I was working in the background. My lawyer and I were in constant contact, ensuring that every legal loophole was closed. We froze accounts, restructured ownerships, and documented every suspicious financial transaction she had made. The investigator I'd hired continued to dig, collecting photographs, receipts, phone logs, anything that could be used as evidence. By the time he was done, I had a folder thicker than a novel, every page proof of her betrayal. And then there was Chris. I wasn't going to let him walk away unscathed either. I started digging into his past, looking for leverage. It didn't take long to find what I needed. Unpaid debts, shady business deals, and a few skeletons he tried to bury but hadn't hidden well enough. The deeper I went, the more disgusted I became. This was the man she had chosen over me? A man who couldn't even keep his own life in order. As the days turned into weeks, the tension in the house grew. I could feel it in the way Lila avoided my eyes, the way her laughter seemed forced, the way she flinched when my phone rang unexpectedly. She knew something was off, but she didn't know what. I made sure to keep her guessing, dropping hints here and there just to watch her squirm. One night, as we sat in the living room, I casually mentioned, "I've been thinking about updating the estate plan. You know, making sure everything is secure for the future." She froze for a split second before forcing a smile. "That's a good idea," she said, her voice just a little too high-pitched. "It's always good to be prepared." Prepared. She had no idea just how prepared I was. Chris was harder to deal with. He was cocky, too sure of himself. He didn't see me as a threat, which only made me more determined to show him exactly what I was capable of. I started showing up at places I knew he'd be. A coffee shop he frequented, the gym he went to every Thursday morning. I'd sit just close enough for him to notice me, but far enough to leave him wondering if it was a coincidence. It wasn't. I wanted him to feel the pressure, to know that I was watching, even if he didn't understand why. The suspense was building, not just for them, but for me too. I was playing a dangerous game, walking a fine line between control and chaos. Every move I made had to be calculated, every word I spoke carefully chosen. One wrong step, and the whole plan could fall apart. But I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when I was so close. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Lila had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she went upstairs. It buzzed with a message from Chris. My stomach churned as I read it. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Same place." I felt my blood run cold. Tonight. They were meeting tonight. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my keys and followed her when she left the house later that evening. I kept my distance, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. She pulled into the parking lot of a small, upscale hotel. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched her walk inside, her head held high as if she had nothing to hide. I parked a few blocks away and waited. Minutes felt like hours as I sat there, the weight of what I was about to do pressing down on me. But I couldn't turn back. This was the moment I had been preparing for, the moment where everything would come to light. When I finally walked into that hotel lobby, the air felt heavy, my steps deliberate. The receptionist glanced at me, but I ignored her, heading straight for the elevators. I knew the room number. I had seen it in their messages. Room 304. I stood outside the door, my heart pounding so loudly that I was sure they could hear it inside. For a moment, I hesitated. Not because I doubted myself, but because I wanted to savor this moment. The moment before everything they thought they knew would come crashing down. I knocked. Once. Twice. The door opened, and there they were. Chris looked stunned, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Lila's face drained of color, her eyes wide with panic. What are you doing here?" she stammered, stepping in front of Chris as if to shield him. I didn't answer. I just stepped inside, shutting the door behind me. The folder in my hand felt like a weapon, every piece of evidence a nail in the coffin of their lies. I dropped it on the table, the sound echoing in the small room. "Let's talk," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I think it's time we cleared the air." Chris stepped back instinctively, his confidence crumbling as the realization set in. Lila stood frozen, her face a canvas of fear, guilt, and defiance all at once. The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by the sound of the folder hitting the table. "Go ahead," I gestured toward the papers spilling out. "Take a look. Familiarize yourselves with the evidence." Neither of them moved. Lila's eyes darted toward Chris, silently pleading for him to take the lead, but he was rooted in place. I sighed, shaking my head as I flipped open the folder myself, pulling out a handful of photographs and spreading them across the table. "Recognize these?" I asked, glancing at Lila. Her face paled further as she stared at the images. Shots of her and Chris in restaurants, at hotels, holding hands, kissing. "You've been busy," I said, my voice cold. "But you didn't think I'd notice, did you? This isn't what it looks like, Lila finally stammered, but her voice lacked conviction. Chris, emboldened by her attempt to speak, stepped forward. Nathan, man, listen. I cut him off sharply, my tone turning ice cold. Don't you dare. You think you can justify this? You think there's anything you can say to make this okay? He fell silent, his bravado deflating like a punctured balloon. I could see the fear creeping into his expression, the realization that this wasn't going to end well for him. You planned this together, didn't you? I continued, turning my attention back to Lila. You thought you'd string me along, drain my accounts, and then walk away with everything. Did you think I wouldn't fight back? Lila opened her mouth, then closed it again, at a loss for words. The silence between us stretched, heavy and electric, until I couldn't stand it anymore. You know what hurts the most? I said, my voice breaking just slightly. It's not the money, or the lies, or even the betrayal. It's the fact that I trusted you. I built my life around you. And this is how you repay me? For a moment, I saw a flicker of regret in her eyes, but it wasn't enough. Not after everything she'd done. Chris tried again. Nathan, look, this has gotten out of hand. Let's just talk this through like adults. I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. Like adults? That's rich, coming from you. Adults don't sneak around behind their friends' backs. Adults don't scheme to ruin someone's life for their own gain. I took a step closer to him, and he flinched. You think you're untouchable, don't you? You think I won't do anything because I'm the nice guy. Well, you're about to find out just how wrong you are. I turned back to the folder, pulling out the legal documents I had prepared. Here's what's going to happen, I said, laying them out on the table. I've already filed for divorce, and my lawyer has ensured that you won't see a single penny of what you thought you were entitled to. Lila's mouth fell open in shock. You can't do that, she protested, her voice shrill. Oh, but I can, I shot back. And I have. Every account you've accessed, every dollar you've taken. It's all documented. And Chris? I turned to him with a cold smile. I've got enough on you to ruin your life. Your debts, your scams, your little side hustles, they're all coming to light. Chris's face turned red, his fists clenching at his sides. You can't just ruin me like this, he spat. I stepped closer, lowering my voice to a dangerous whisper. Watch me. The tension in the room was unbearable, the air crackling with the weight of unspoken threats. Lila finally broke the silence, her voice trembling. Nathan, please. We can fix this. We can. There's no we, Lila. I interrupted, my voice hard. There hasn't been a we for a long time. You destroyed that the moment you decided I was just a stepping stone for your greed. I grabbed the folder and turned toward the door. You'll be hearing from my lawyer, I said over my shoulder. And one more thing, don't think for a second that this is over. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. As I walked out of that room, leaving them to face the wreckage of their own choices, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It wasn't satisfaction, not yet, but it was a start. I drove home in silence, the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. The satisfaction I'd expected didn't come, not fully at least. Instead, I felt a strange emptiness, as though the confrontation had only scratched the surface of everything I was carrying. The betrayal, the years I'd wasted, the memories that now felt tainted, they all hung over me like a dark cloud. When I arrived, the house was quiet, too quiet. The life it once held seemed to have vanished, leaving only hollow walls and echoes of what used to be. I stood in the living room, staring at the photo of Lila and me from our wedding day. Her smile, once genuine and full of warmth, now felt like a lie. I took the frame off the shelf and turned it face down on the table. I couldn't bear to look at it anymore. The next few days were a blur of meetings with lawyers, endless paperwork, and phone calls. Each step was a reminder of how deeply entwined our lives had become and how much work it would take to unravel them. My lawyer was efficient and relentless, ensuring every loophole was closed, every asset protected. But no amount of legal victories could undo the damage Lila had done to my trust. And then the fallout began. Lila tried to fight back, of course. She filed counterclaims, claiming she had contributed to my success, that she deserved a share of everything. But the evidence I had collected left her with little ground to stand on. Every lie, every betrayal, every shady transaction, it was all laid bare in court. The judge wasn't impressed by her crocodile tears or her attempts to paint herself as the victim. Chris didn't fare any better. Once word of his financial misdeeds started spreading, his reputation crumbled. He lost clients, his business partners pulled out, and his debts came back to haunt him. I made sure of it. With the help of my lawyer, I leaked just enough information to ruin his credibility without implicating myself. Watching him scramble to pick up the pieces of his life gave me a grim sense of satisfaction. But as much as I wanted to celebrate their downfall, it didn't fill the void they had left behind. The house felt colder, emptier. I found myself sitting in my office late at night, staring at the walls, wondering how it had all come to this. I thought about the man I used to be, the man who believed in love, in partnership, in building a life together. That man felt like a stranger now, someone I barely recognized. One night, as I sat at my desk, I got a call from my mother. "Nathan, you need to come over," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "You can't keep burying yourself in work. You need to heal." I resisted at first, but eventually, I gave in. I drove to their house the next day, the weight of everything I'd been carrying pressing down on me. When I walked through the door, my mother enveloped me in a hug, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a small sense of comfort. "You did what you had to do," she said, her voice steady. "But now it's time to let go. You can't carry this anger forever." Her words stayed with me long after I left. She was right. I couldn't let this consume me. But moving on wasn't going to be easy. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of what I'd lost, of the life I thought I had. The idea of starting over felt overwhelming, almost impossible. Still, I tried. I sold the house, too many memories were tied to it, and moved into a smaller, simpler place. I started spending more time with friends I had neglected over the years, reconnecting with people who genuinely cared about me. It wasn't much, but it was a step in the right direction. As for Lila, she disappeared from my life entirely. The last I heard, she was living in a modest apartment, working a job far below the lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. Chris had moved on as well, though not by choice. He'd filed for bankruptcy, his once pristine image shattered beyond repair. There was a certain poetic justice in their downfall, but it didn't bring me the closure I thought it would. That had to come from within, from rebuilding my life, piece by piece, and learning to trust again. The first step was accepting that my life would never be the same. The Nathan who trusted blindly, who believed that love could conquer all, was gone. But maybe that wasn't a bad thing. Maybe this version of me, wiser, stronger, more aware, was exactly who I needed to become. I started small. Mornings became sacred, a time to reflect and focus. I'd wake up early, make a cup of coffee, and sit on the balcony of my new apartment as the sun rose. Those quiet moments became my anchor, a reminder that even after the darkest nights, the sun always rose again. Work became my sanctuary. For years, I'd poured everything into building my business, but this time it felt different. It wasn't about proving myself or achieving success for someone else's approval. It was about creating something meaningful, something that truly reflected my values. I started a mentorship program, helping young entrepreneurs navigate the challenges I'd faced. Watching their growth, their enthusiasm, reminded me of the passion I once had and reignited a spark I thought I'd lost. But healing wasn't just about work. It was about connection. For too long, I had isolated myself, believing I could handle everything on my own. That had to change. I made an effort to reconnect with old friends, to let them in on the struggles I'd been carrying. To my surprise, they welcomed me back with open arms, their support unwavering. It felt strange at first, leaning on others, but it also felt good, right even. One day, while volunteering at a local charity event, I met Evelyn. She wasn't like anyone I'd known before, calm, grounded, and deeply kind. She wasn't flashy or concerned with appearances. She was real. We started talking, first about the event, then about life. There was no pretense, no agenda. Just two people sharing stories, finding common ground. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel: hope. We began seeing each other regularly, slowly, cautiously. Evelyn wasn't just a breath of fresh air. She was a reminder that not everyone was out to take advantage. She'd been through her own share of challenges, and her resilience inspired me. She never asked about my past, never pressed for details, but when I finally told her, she listened without judgment. "Sometimes," she said softly, "we have to lose everything to find ourselves again." Her words stayed with me, not as a platitude, but as a truth I was finally ready to accept. I hadn't just lost Lila. I'd lost myself in trying to be the man I thought she wanted. Now, I had the chance to rebuild, not for anyone else, but for me. Months turned into a year, and the wounds began to heal. They didn't disappear entirely. Some scars ran too deep for that, but they stopped hurting the way they once did. I found joy in the little things. A good book, a long walk, a conversation that left me smiling. Life wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough. One afternoon, as Evelyn and I sat on the porch of a small cabin I'd rented for the weekend, she asked, "Do you ever regret how things turned out?" I thought about it for a moment before answering. "No," I said, my voice steady, "because every mistake, every betrayal, every loss, it brought me here. And here is exactly where I want to be." She smiled, her hand finding mine. The simplicity of that moment, the peace it held, was something I hadn't thought possible not long ago. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I felt a quiet contentment settle over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking back with regret or forward with fear. I was simply present, grateful for the journey that had brought me here and the person I'd become along the way. Because sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's rebuilding a life so full of purpose and happiness that it leaves no room for the pain of the past. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next gripping tale. Share your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing from you. Until next time.